so thank you, Dara and Marcus, for today's IVI Coffee Talk, Love, Data and Coffee. And as part of the New University Libraries Data and Love Data Week 23, we're doing the IVI Coffee Talk around one of our weeks which is now around the Data Week. So we're delighted, and hopefully we'll have some people join as well, because we might have some new folks join. So I will hand it over to you both and we'll get started.
Yeah, thanks, Carol.
Thanks, Carol.
Maybe first a little introduction. Myself, like Marcus Helfert, I'm the director of the Innovation Valley Institute, and dealing with data more than half of my life, probably 25 plus years, and always thought that kind of the data topic is an interesting one. So how to arrange that, how to manage this. So I'm really passionate about data. So thanks for that opportunity to talk for half an hour about data. And I also have my coffee in front of me. So we will see how far we get with the coffee, but how far we will get with data. So Dara.
I'm Dara O'Brien. I've known Marcus for 20 years now. That's scary, but I've been doing data stuff on the business side of data since 1998. And I think it's really great that IVI and Maynooth have asked me to come along to talk today, because I'm getting really sick and tired of another university in Ireland who brings people in from America and the UK who I know, or they're friends of mine. And I keep going, I'm in the audience at the events instead of being talking at the events, particularly as I've been doing it longer than most of those people. I've worked with mainly Irish organizations on data stuff, and a fellow of the Irish Computer Society since 2008, because I wouldn't stop talking about data when everyone else wants to talk about middleware and all those fancy things. So that's what I do. I'm the managing director of a company called Bridge. We're a consultancy and we're a partner with the IVI.
And maybe I start with our conversation, and we keep that in the tradition of the coffee talk. So we just talk about the topic, this one, data. And Dara, you just mentioned basically, so the fancy stuff, like also like architecture, integration, more the technology side. But I think data and the data topic is far more than this. So also now with maybe it's even a hype now, or the topic on artificial intelligence, so many people talking about it. But also, again, the data input is first of all, but also data is actually far more than that. And that's also, you should see a slide there, or the screen of a program which I'm leading, is Empower, the SFI co-funded program on data governance. And why we put that up there, I think it reflects the kind of that data is far more than in the middle privacy preserving technologies or artificial intelligence, or the technology component. It has also some business aspects, values aspects, data quality, also how to manage the data capabilities around this. Then also, of course, with compliance, regulations is important, audits around this. GDPR was just one element in this. And then on the right side, standards. I think we need far more regulation, standards, ways of best practices, looking at frameworks. And then I hope you can see that on the side, the fifth pillar on ethics, people-centric approaches. So what do we want to do? And this is kind of really, I'm really passionate about this kind of to shape data sharing, data management, data governance in that way that it works for everyone. So of course, businesses should make some money out of it, so to have some commercial aspects.
I'm all in favor of businesses making money out of data.
But at the other side, you also need to think about that actually people who provide the data should be fair, trusted in an environment that it works for both.
Exactly. So I really live, Castlebrigde lives on the pillar 5 there, the people-centric design and ethics, because you can't do data without thinking about the people aspects. And this is where organizations have consistently fallen on their face for the last 25, 30 years. Every iteration I've seen of data management evolution, there's a mad rush into technology, and then people realize that the people stuff hasn't been done, and then they go, what are we going to do about that? Let's get more technology, because that'll fix it, because technology fixed it the last time. And we've seen that cycle happening now. Good news, it's happening faster. It used to have to wait 7 years, now it's every 3 years that we see the same iteration. ChatGPT, fantastic. I wrote a blog post about it that broke my company's website, because I pointed out that if you have a thing that's generating spuriously correct and incorrect content that is then published, that then feeds the indexing algorithms and the decision trees of the AI that's generating that content, you end up with a data, what we've seen in the data quality world for the last 30 years, a spiral of crap in your data set. And then you can't make valid, trusted decisions. But that comes into people understanding what the tools can do, what they should do, and whether it's the right tool for the job. And that's the key challenge here.
Yeah, and you mentioned data quality, and I know with the 20 years we're working, collaborating together, we talked a lot about like 15, 20 years ago with data quality, data management. And what I think happened over the last couple of years, so first of all, we have now more data, but they added more to it. So the technology, now we have the nice AI component, we have the chatbots, we have far more possibilities on this, but on the other side, we haven't even solved yet the fundamental thing of actually managing the data right.
And if you remember, Marcus, back in 2004, 2005, we had an event in DCU where I coined O'Brien's third law of process automation. Mm-hmm. If you automate a bad process badly, the only thing that will happen is you will wind up with bad things happening faster than you can ever possibly hope to keep up with them. That's what we call big data, statistics on steroids, as I like to call it, machine learning and AI. If we don't get a handle on the inputs and on the process and the use, we don't know what the output and more importantly, and in the data ethics book that I wrote with my colleague Catherine O'Keefe, we talk about the idea of information and process outcomes as being the key thing. Everything we do in information management should be about the outcome we're delivering to stakeholders. And much like if you go to a magic show, you don't care how the magician does the trick. You care that the trick worked or didn't work, because sometimes that's even funnier. But we need to be looking at the outcomes, and we look at things like the evolution of technology. What's the outcome we're trying to achieve? And are we using the right tool in the right way? And have we thought about the negative externalities that might arise? And have we thought about the issues around the input quality? One of the earliest examples of AI supported decision-making, machine learning supported decision-making in the US, was the introduction of sentencing recommendation tools for judges. Judges are busy. And this wonderful promise was the AI will look at the case and the facts of the case and will then give the judge a range of sentencing based on historic cases, ignoring entirely that the historic body of case law in the US for criminal prosecutions tends to have people who are not of my skin tone getting harsher sentences than I would get. Strangely, the machine learning says this is the parameters of the person, and even if it doesn't have data about ethnicity, it can infer that from names. And as a result, we have a systemic compounding of a social problem because the input data quality wasn't controlled for, and we didn't think about the outcome.
And that hits also to this, so where we saw in data quality, data management, that middle part, so managing information as a process, as a manufacturing system is quite important. And what we see now is, particularly when we look at the fifth pillar there with data ethics, people-centric, so there are many frameworks, many statements around what actually trustworthy would mean. And on the other side, we have a lot of technology, like where we can analyze large data sets, interfere from the data set. But the middle piece actually, to actually translate these policies into proper processes and really safeguarding data sharing, that's a key to it.
It's actually even more fundamental than that. Part of the work research I was doing for the second edition of the book, out on the 3rd of May, all good bookshops, discount codes will be available. I need new shoes. We looked at research that had been done on the various AI ethics frameworks that have been published. The one thing they all have in common is they're all aspirational. None of them break down to this is what you do level of specificity. So what you have to do is take that high level principle, cascade that down into a concrete policy, and then cascade that down into processes and procedures and decision supports and things like that in the organization. And guess what? None of that's technology. That's people and communication and understanding data and understanding the implications of the data.
Yeah, and in addition to the processes, you need to think about the capability to manage data. So to actually, what are the skills needed to actually do proper data management, proper data sharing, and all this. I just want to get to the other side of that diagram on the 5 research streams. So we have the data markets in there, and it's written about data business models, data value. So the more maybe commercial side, but it's more than that. It's basically all the value generation what data can have. And like over the years, data value was always mentioned, but there are not many frameworks which actually have some start of actually valuing data in a systematic way.
Doug Laney's book, Infonomics, is good. Like Doug's an old friend. He's a friend I've known for a long time. Let's not get chronologically biased on this. He has really good work that he did when he was in Gartner on the economics of information. I haven't really seen anything else since then that brings that forward. But we also have to bear in mind that the view of data value and data monetization and data value generation that we've had dominating for the past couple of years has been around financial value of data. United Airlines, when the pandemic hit, they mortgaged their customer database for $6 billion to keep the airline afloat. You can tell me, if you want to tell me the data doesn't have value, United Airlines, $6 billion, American Airlines got $4.5 billion, and none of the lenders looked at the quality of the data. So they've given money on an asset, they don't know the condition of the asset. So imagine a bank wanting to lend you money to buy a house. And they say, we don't need to look to see is the house going to fall down. We don't look to see is there a roof on the house. That's what we're seeing happening. But more importantly, the discussion now needs to move to social value of data and moving away from a shareholder theory view of the world to a stakeholder theory view of the world or a social justice theory of the world. When we get to the pure not-for-profit view of organizations, but at least balancing competing rights. And what's the social value of information in terms of improving outcomes in society, particularly the challenges we're facing. And data is what is it's the only tool we have at the start to try and tackle these things, because it's what tells us if things are working or not. It's how we do our modeling. But if the data we're putting into the model is crap, the outputs of the model are crap, and we spend time and money doing things that aren't. Classic example, Volkswagen. Volkswagen. Engineers of Volkswagen, I will defend them to the hilt. They did exactly what they were asked to do. And they delivered exactly on the engineering ethos and ethic of Volkswagen, which was to we solved the problems we're given elegantly. And they were told, make sure diesel cars pass emission tests in a lab. They did. Brings us back to quality of information product specification. No one said, make sure they pass the emissions tests in the real world as well. But that data fed into governmental modeling of emission standards and climate change targets. That little bit of data, that little escape clause in the engine management system had a significant knock-on implication. That's the social value and social impact of data, which is where we need to look at the data markets aspect. How do we unlock that data in a safe, controlled, compliant, and managed way?
Definitely agree, and that's why I'm also passionate about that data for good, data for common purpose. So repurposing data for more societal value, for a good value. And I think there are plenty of examples like climate data, mobility data, environmental data can be repurposed, and even knowing about the area or something. So there are lots of examples, I think, where we can have dual usage of the same data. So I think that's also something interesting, that commercial data value doesn't exclude social value on it. So basically, and that requires some data sharing in a safe and a guarded way, and also in a contractual way. So for example, in the crisis situation, mobile operators, they have a huge amount of data, and how to make that really accessible in a legal way. In also risk is an important aspect on this, so that they basically don't pass on risks, and that there basically are frameworks for these contractual issues to share data in that way. So that's a really important aspect.
During the early stages of the pandemic, we did a lot of work on looking at best practice models, and we published stuff, and we gave research away for free from a commercial side, because we were pulling stuff together from various sources. And there are good models for doing that. The challenge is getting government agencies who are looking for data to get out of the idea of we need to have access to the data. No, you need to have access to the answer that the data can give you, because that's the bit of data you need to inform your decision making. And then we architect back to how we can give the information in a way that's compliant, that's risk managed. Because bear in mind, as they learned in some of the in a number of the African countries where they use mobile data in response to the Ebola pandemic, once you turn that on, governments are slightly resistant to turning it off again. And it does allow you to track the movements of large groups of people in the country. And that could be a problem if you can then link that back to identify the people who are in that group.
Yeah. It's again, all the time, it's two sides of the same coin. That's why I have a coin here. It's just to remind myself, actually, it's always two sides. It's a positive one where we can do loads of good things, but also the risk. And of course, also what things can actually happen with data is a really, and that's why we need to balance this. And that's why we also, when we designed that research agenda, first of all, it's kind of, there's a little bit of intention on left and right kind of data markets that we have them outside. And in the middle, the technology that actually technology can help to do something like this. For example, we can extract parameters out of data, which are just characteristics so that we don't share personal identifiable information. So in many cases, we don't need that. We just need some of the characteristics of the data.
And that's where technologies that are kind of emerging now, like data mesh technology / implementation approach or data fabric are interesting. But the more I look at them, the more I go, well done, lads. You just reinvented what I was doing 20 years ago, and you have a slightly fancier widget to implement it. Like 15 years ago, I was implementing a metadata-driven global data warehouse architecture for a telecoms company in Europe, where they had all their regions had to be able to bring data together for reporting purposes, and we kept the data in the countries, and we architected a metadata layer to allow access. And we put the business rules for what data could be accessed at the group level into the metadata layer. That's called data mesh, apparently. Who knew? Also, it didn't work. That's another story. It was really hard to make it work in practice.
Yeah, and I think that's also when that middle part on data management, data quality, data value, there's a huge amount of body of knowledge around this already. But then I see on the other side, like basically, so artificial intelligence, technology driven approaches, they almost ignore that whole body of knowledge in the middle. And the same on the other side with
it's like data privacy.
Yep.
I love when the IAPP comes out with a new buzzword phrase and I go, no, that's not new. We've been doing that for years. They came out with data governance as a term in about 2015. And they were really, really upset when I sent them a link to all the academic research going back 25, 30 years on data governance. Because they were coining it as a new thing organizations need to do. And I go, well, I'm sorry, I was doing that in the phone company in the early 2000s. That's how we made sure the bills were right. That was one of my big things when I was in the phone company. We were responsible for the accuracy of the phone bill. And we had to determine when the bill was inaccurate. And the bill was inaccurate when it was printed and sent to the customer with the wrong value on it. Up until that point, it was just data in movement, and we had to stop the inaccuracy getting out. Because that's, once it went on a bill, that was a criminal offense.
Yes, and it just shows also that data quality at that time, remember that project also, like that was actually really important, and it's still important.
Yeah.
And it's still not solved all. And it's really important and the data value part and all. Yeah.
And what's happened over the years, and I've seen this in the telecom sector and other industries, is that the early adopter architectures were put in around data quality and data governance. There's been changes in management, changes in leadership. They've ripped out technologies and they've put in new technologies. But they haven't actually maintained, in a lot of cases, they haven't maintained the people layer around that to fix the underlying problem. And then they wonder why the problems come back, even though they bought all these new technologies. Like, changing brand of your bin doesn't fix the problem that you have too much refuse in the house. You actually have to go and empty the bin at some point.
And that's why we need to talk, when we talk about data quality, data governance, thinking about kind of layers from societal impact, people, processes, technology. And I think that interdisciplinarity is really important. And now we need to be a little bit careful. We sound really old, like when we talk about 20, 25 years old. But so I just wanted to also open a little bit the discussion.
Hey kids, what do you want to ask the old man?
But it's really like the excitement and the importance of the topic never really went away. It's got to.
It's a fundamental building block, and it's been a fundamental building block of information management since 5,000 years BC, when we first wrote things down. One of the first pieces of recorded writing is a letter of complaint about the failure to meet the specification for the quality of copper in Babylon. We don't have the original invoice or specification to compare against. We just know someone was unhappy with what they got. But one of the first things you've written down is a complaint about quality.
So I don't know if there are any comments or questions, or like it's such a big topic, data, but like my coffee, I still have a little bit in it, so we have about 8 minutes left.
I went straight off the vodka, Marcus.
I can go first. And is always, and I don't have an answer, but really this trade-off of balance between people and data. Because on one end, and power and empowerment, you know that it's very important. You use data to empower people, but at the same time, of course, the data can empower or disempower people. So what is, and the people should kind of not use data. At some point, should not use data to make decisions. Should use data maybe to make to be empowered, but not to use too much data, or to use data in a different way to make decisions. So what is the right or the best trade-off or the best balance between the data and the people when it comes to make decisions?
It depends on the decision. But in terms of the trade-off, the important thing to focus on is whether you're taking the person out of the decision entirely. Are they be presented with the answer and told that's the answer, off you go? If someone's been presented with options and they're being told, well, this is the range of choice you have to make, the person's still making a decision and they can still override the machine. IBM actually in 1979, their systems coder handbook, computers should not be allowed to make decisions because they're just machines. There's other things the machine won't know or understand or appreciate that need to be factored into a decision. So I teach a course on data-driven decision-making. And one of the examples I give is the use of data in Ford Motor Company in the 1960s and in the US military during the Vietnam War, where Robert McNamara said, give me data and I'll know how the war's going. So people faked the data because they wanted to get promoted. They maximized their hit rates in the military. And in Ford, what they did was to show that there was no inventory left in the stock rooms at the end of a quarter, is they dumped the parts into a river. It's one of the reasons why Flint, Michigan has polluted water, is because Ford tainted the water in the 1960s by dumping car parts into the river. So how you use the data, you need to think about how people will interpret it, how people will view it, how people will infer from it. And it's really important to keep people in the loop as the deciders. Data should inform, it shouldn't be deciding. And again, IBM wrote in 1979, Frank Herbert in the book Dune, the part of the Bene Gesserit Codex, or Dementai Codex, thou shalt not make a computer in the image of a man. You have to put people in the position to make the decisions. That's empowering people. If the computer is making the decision for people and it's a blind computer says no, that's disempowering people.
Yeah, but I think this is a really difficult question, but one of the key aspects around it. So how to find that balance between the two sides? That's a really important thing, kind of. And then also, I think when we're talking about empowering people, empowering decision makers, it goes far more than just decision support. It goes to helping the right decision, kind of that they are still actually understanding the complexity of context. And so it's a very difficult question actually to answer, but I think a really important one where we want to go with this. So, and I would say like certain decisions can be done by machines, like tax returns to a certain percentage can be done, automatically assessed. Yeah.
Yes, to
So,
an extent.
to an extent, and we have always decisions like in, but
within that context, we have to have an understanding of the quality of the data, an understanding of the margin of acceptance of error in the process, and we have to have a human intermediated error handling process. So if there is an exception in the data, someone can take action on it. A couple of years ago, there was a farmer in, not sure it was Ireland or the UK, was being prosecuted for failure to declare earnings because the tax office was told he drove a Lamborghini. Fun fact, Lamborghini make two types of vehicle, performance sports cars and tractors. Yes, the farmer drove a Lamborghini. Context, metadata is really, really important there.
And then also like in data quality, data management, we talked for a long time about the context of data. So yeah. Any other comments?
I have a question, and I don't know if I hope I'm going to phrase it properly. Tara, and obviously the question is for both of you, but you have alluded to your introduction at the time when you were talking about, AI technology.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about the people-centric, we were talking about the fifth pillar. So where do you find the sweet spot in terms of, I know it's a difficult question, but where do you find the sweet spot between those two? Because essentially, what we're talking about in terms of data value, data sense, data governance, whatever, we want to find the sweet spot between those two to bring those things sort of together in a collective way that is going to be beneficial. And sort of what Marco was also saying, about empowering people and that sort of thing. So where, in your opinion, do you think, both of you, the sweet spot is two elements together?
If I had the perfect answer to that question, I would patent it. But the first thing we need to do, and this is one of the things that we see with big tech companies engaging with academia. So Tina Gebru commenting on it on Mastodon last week, where they had to pull a paper they were working on because the researcher in-house in the large tech company, their senior management said, no, you can't be involved in that research anymore, because it was contrary to the commercial interests of the organization. So the real challenge here is to go to that creation of a social good rather than a commercial product with these technologies, where we actually bring in critical voices, where we engage with contrary opinions, so we understand the limitations. And again, it goes back to, I'm driving a Lamborghini. Well, the context is important, bringing in the additional perspectives on what the negative use cases are. We did work with a client a couple of years ago where they're trying to develop a particular product. All the people in the company were all male. This is important because when my female colleagues took one look at the product and went, no, that's not going to work, that's not safe. And we told the client, impact assessment is, there's ethical issues here, there's data privacy issues here, there's also potentially safety issues here, because you have a particular perspective. What we need to do is broaden the perspective so that we are aware of where the balance point is. Because at the moment, it can be skewed because we're creating a filter bubble, groupthink mindset, and it's all too easy for the people who are saying, hang on a second, this is a problem, to be pushed out of the room. All the things we're seeing going wrong at the moment with ChatGPT and Bard would wipe 9% off the share price of Google because they published an advert with Bard getting a question wrong. ChatGPT is now abusing people who are asking it questions, trying to find out its original source promise. But all of those questions, all those issues were exactly what Tina Gebru was dismissed from Google for raising as concerns 5 years ago.
So, because we're already over time now, so just kind of 2 sentences to answer that complex, difficult question. So I think we need to recognize the complexity of the topic. That's why we also, with the Empower program for data governance, we have these 5 pillars of research, quite interdisciplinary. And also, like, it's not sufficient to just state certain principles. The principles need to be translated into concrete activities, processes, approaches which companies can follow. So I think that complexity and translating these higher level position statements into something very concrete is really crucial. So, and I think I hand over to Carol.
It's 20% technology, 20% regulation, 60% people.
Fantastic. And thank you both very much. And thanks everyone online for joining. I think that was really good. So thank you, Dara, for coming in, and thanks, Marcus. Sorry, I can't share my slides for some reason, but just to mention, everyone's welcome to join us next week where we continue our coffee talk with Ty McIntyre from the All Institute. And if you've any questions on anything today, please get in contact with us here at IVI at the info@ivi.ie. You can get in contact with us if you have any questions on today. And thanks everyone for joining.